Hi, everyone, and welcome to English for You. I'm Pat.
And I'm Mike.
And today we're going to be teaching you how to make a really tasty snack, which got me thinking, Mike, you've been in Taiwan a while. I've been in Taiwan a while. Are there any snacks from your home country you find yourself really missing sometimes?
That's a really good question. I don't know about now. I think when I first moved here, of course, there were things that I really missed. But now I've lived here so long, I've found my own favorite local Taiwan snacks that I really love. So when I go home, sometimes I eat those things that I used to like. And now I'm kind of like, I don't like this so much anymore. So most of the junk food kind of snacks that I don't really miss. But of course, I do miss some of the snacks that my mom used to make, for example, like at Christmas or something like that, because you can't get something like that anywhere except at home.
Yeah, I know what you mean about that. There's still a few British things that I will always get anytime I go to the UK, like a
Mhm.
Cadbury's cream egg or some extra strong mints, something like that.
Mhm.
Just because you just can't get them very easily here at all. But we're talking today about a snack you can make for yourselves. So let's get into our article, find out what it is and how we put it together.
Reading.
Let's bake some delicious cookies for Homemade Cookies Day. October 1st is National Homemade Cookies Day in the US. So we've got a recipe for some delicious chocolate cookies just for you. First, prepare these ingredients: 3 eggs, 85 grams, 85% cocoa chocolate, 250 grams, 70% cocoa chocolate, 60 grams plain flour, 130 grams sugar, 60 grams butter, 2 grams baking powder, 2 grams salt. Now it's time to cook. 1. Start by boiling some water in a large pan. Place a smaller bowl in the water. Melt the chocolate and butter in the bowl. 2. Whip the eggs and sugar in another bowl until it's nice and thick. 3. Take a third bowl and sift the flour, baking powder, and salt. 4. Then mix the melted chocolate, egg, and flour mixtures together. 5. Place cookies on some baking paper, but make sure you leave lots of space between them. 6. Bake the cookies in the oven for 15 minutes at 180 degrees Celsius. The cookies should be firm but not hard. Enjoy your cookies!
So our article begins by saying why we're going to talk about this today. It says October the 1st is National Homemade Cookies Day in the US. What a fantastic holiday.
That does sound like a great holiday. I don't think it's really a national holiday. I think you still have to go to school or go to work on National Homemade Cookies Day, but maybe at school you will make some cookies because that would be a wonderful, fun thing to do. Or, of course, you can always make them at home. When we talk about something homemade, basically you make it yourself. You make it at home. This isn't something you buy in a store or something that's made in a factory. It's made by people at home in their kitchen. So they have many special days around the world for really interesting things, and this has to be one of the more unusual ones that I've heard about. But sure, if you're going to get into the kitchen, make yourself some snacks and avoid all of the junk food at the store, National Homemade Cookies Day is a wonderful place to start. So, as the article continues, so we've got a recipe for some delicious chocolate cookies just for you, all of us.
Okay, well, we've got a word here, recipe.
Yeah, when we talk about a recipe, what we're talking about is basically the instructions, the guide that you need to make a food by yourself. Recipes usually have two parts to them. The first part will list all of the things that you need to buy or the things you need to get together in your kitchen to make the food. So if we're making cookies, that would probably be sugar and butter, chocolate, probably flour, things like that. And then the second part of the recipe will be basically a step-by-step list of instructions of what to do and when to do it. So first you do this, second you do that. Probably with cookies, the last thing you do is put them in an oven to cook, and then of course you eat them afterwards. So recipes should give you all the information and all the advice you need to make some kind of delicious food.
Okay, well, let's take a look at our recipe. And as Mike said, we start with what you need. The article says, first, prepare these ingredients. The ingredients for something are foods that you use to make other foods. Now, some of these ingredients you could eat by themselves or, maybe cook them and then eat them. But the idea here is these are the things, the components, the bits that go into a larger dish. If you're making some kind of pasta dish, pasta will be an ingredient, different meats, vegetables, some kind of sauce, bit of cheese on top. All of those are the ingredients for that kind of pasta dish. So let's see what ingredients we need to make these homemade cookies.
Okay, so the first thing we see there are 3 eggs. So if you don't have any eggs, go to the supermarket. But if you do, go to your fridge and get 3 eggs out. That is all you will need for eggs to make this dish. And what's next?
Well, we've got 85 grams of 85% cocoa chocolate. So this is pretty dark chocolate. It's going to have a strong taste, quite a bitter taste, which is why you actually don't need a lot of it. It does, if you compare it to what's next, it's a much smaller amount than the following set of ingredients.
That's right. And of course, here we're using metric measurements, grams and things like that. Other recipes might talk about cups or tablespoons or teaspoons or something. So sometimes you'll need special spoons or maybe a scale, something to measure how heavy something is, just so you make sure you have the right amounts. If you use too much or not enough of something, the food might not quite taste exactly right. So 85 grams of this bitter 85% cocoa chocolate, and then 250 grams, so quite a lot more, of 70% cocoa chocolate. So both of these together will give you that nice chocolatey taste that you're looking for, but it probably won't be very sweet quite yet.
Not just yet, no. Well, next we add one of the most important ingredients for any kind of cookies or baking, cakes, bread, that sort of stuff, 60 grams of plain flour. Now, you'll notice when you see a recipe like this, a recipe list often misses out small words like of and to. That's just the way recipes are presented. They don't need to be full grammatical sentences. So we can say 60 grams of plain flour, but just in a recipe, you'd normally see 60 grams plain flour. But what is flour? Well, it's basically some kind of grain that's been smashed up into tiny bits of powder that you use for baking. It could come from wheat or rice or barley or corn or any kind of cereal. They just take these large grains, smash them down into powder, and then the smaller pieces of powder like dust is used to make different kinds of goods. For example, you might say, the cook spread some flour on the table and then began to make the pizza. So this is a common baking thing. You put a bit of flour down and it stops the dough, which is a mixture of flour and water and stuff, from sticking to the table.
So we have our chocolate, we have our flour, some eggs, but we still need that sweetness. Well, here it comes. 130 grams of sugar. That's what's next. That is what's going to make that sweet chocolate taste that we're looking for in our cookies.
Yep, but we need something else apart from the eggs to get all this powdery stuff to stick together, because
Mm.
otherwise it will just be too hard. It won't bake. So we add 60 grams of butter.
Okay, and that will also make it rich and make it nice and smooth tasting in our mouths, that nice chocolate. And then 2 grams, a very small amount of baking powder. This just helps it to rise and helps the cookie to come out of the oven nice. And finally, 2 grams of salt. The salt will actually help the chocolate taste a little bit nicer and a little bit sweeter. But again, just a little bit of salt. You want sweet cookies, not salty cookies. So when we talk about powder, what we're talking about is basically flour. That's a good example of a powder. You take something, you crush it and grind it and smash it till it's very, very small. Think of sand or think of salt, smaller even than that. Often with powder, if you have some on your hands and you blow it, it will make kind of a cloud. Or if you clap your hands together, you'll have a cloud. Flour is very light, very dry, and very, very small. But we use it in all sorts of different ways. Of course, with cooking, flour, baking powder. These are things you'll find, types of powder you'll find in a kitchen. Here's another example. This powder will help your skin to feel dry and cool. Yeah, we can put powder on our skin too to pick up some wetness or else to make our rough skin feel smoother or something like that.
Okay, so that's our ingredients list. That's everything you'll need. And as the article says, now it's time to cook. So we move on to the next stage of the recipe, which is the instructions. And it says 1. So they give numbers to make sure you follow the order. Start by boiling some water in a large pan. Okay, so you're going to fill a pan with water, a big pan. Put that on your stove, turn on the gas or electricity, and get that water nice and hot. So it's boiling, bubbles are coming up.
That's right. And the next part in step 1, and the first things that we do, it says place a smaller bowl in the water. So you need 2 bowls that kind of fit inside each other, one bigger and then one smaller to put inside the bigger one. What we're doing here is we're melting the chocolate without burning it, because you don't want to burn the chocolate. So you have to do it slowly and carefully. That's why this is the first step. We should point out, if you're cooking something, read the instructions all the way through. Yes, these go 1, 2, 3, but sometimes you have to do different things at the same time. So you should read the whole recipe right till the end and then go back to start making it.
Exactly. And as Mike said, we're melting the chocolate and also the butter in the bowl. Melt the chocolate and butter in the bowl. So if you melt something, you take it from a basically solid form and turn it into more of a liquid form. So think of ice. That's water that's a solid. Ice melts, it becomes water. And if you keep heating it, it'll eventually become gas or steam. You could have an ice cream. When you get it, it's nice and solid, it's really cold, and it's even hard to bite sometimes. But after a while, it'll melt, it'll get soft, and it'll end up, if you don't eat it quickly, falling off onto the floor or just basically turning into very sweet flavored milk. As we see in this example sentence, the child's ice cream cone quickly began to melt in the hot sun. Yeah, eat it fast if you're out under the sun.
That's right. Here we're melting, of course, the butter and the chocolate so we can mix it all together with all of the other ingredients. So let's get to those other ingredients in step 2, which says whip the eggs and sugar in another bowl until it's nice and thick. So crack those 3 eggs and add that sugar all together in one bowl and then whip it. So what we're doing here is we're not whipping something like you might see someone in a circus whipping a lion or something like that. No, basically what we're doing is we're sort of stirring it really, really, really quickly, maybe using something kind of a special thing like an egg beater. You could also use a fork for this, but you really need a lot of arm power. You need a lot of muscle power to really, really work those eggs and work that sugar together. We're adding air to it, and that's what makes it nice and thick. So I would say you should probably be whipping this stuff for at least 2 or 3 minutes.
Yep, and we have an example sentence for whip here because it's a very common kind of cooking technique that you'd use, especially with eggs or cream or any
Right.
ingredient you want to combine and make thicker. For example, the chef whipped some eggs and oil together to make mayonnaise. Yeah, that's a way to do it. You just get it, and there you go. So
That's
yeah,
right.
common baking and cooking technique here. So we've got this mix. What happens next? We go to step 3. Take a third bowl. Okay, so you've got one with the melting butter and chocolate. Number 2 has your whipped eggs and sugar. Number 3, take a third bowl and sift the flour, baking powder, and salt. So this is another common verb you'll see in recipes, very especially in baking, because to sift something basically means to put something through, we call it a sieve, like a metal, almost like a metal net, to remove any lumps, any large particles, so that what comes out is all very fine and very even. Sometimes flour and things like that will kind of stick together in its bag, so then when you bake it, it doesn't bake properly. Sifting it means that it's all nice and even, all the bits are the same size, nothing is lumping together, and you've got a nice even mix of powder that you can then bake with.
Right. So you'll basically put the flour in that sieve and kind of shake it back and forth like that, and that will also mix the baking powder, the salt, the flour all together at the same time. So now we have these 3 kind of separate things. Now it's time to get all of this stuff together. So that's what we're doing in step 4. It says then mix the melted chocolate, egg, and flour mixtures together. So we've got the flour, we've got the egg, we got the chocolate and all the other stuff, and we're putting all of that together into one thing.
And here we see today's grammar point. We called it melted chocolate, okay? So here we're using a verb and we're using it in its past tense form to act as an adjective. It's modifying or describing the word chocolate. And there are pretty much any verb can be used either in the VING form or in the past tense form to modify a noun. The difference is with a VING, it's usually an ability or a property a thing has or something it's doing. For example, a crying baby. It's a baby that right now is crying. Okay, a VED adjective usually describes the state something is in because of what's happened before. So melted chocolate, this chocolate has already been melted, so it's now melted chocolate, chocolate that has been melted. Here are a couple more examples using these different adjective forms. There is a sleeping cat on the sofa. The cat is sleeping right now. Or please give me your completed tests. So give me the tests that have already been completed. So just some different ways you can use verbs as adjectives to modify other nouns.
That's right. So now we've mixed all of our ingredients together. We have this big bowl of what we would call cookie dough, D-O-U-G-H. And dough is basically what will become bread or become a cake after you cook it. This is kind of like a raw cookie. And of course, you need to cook it first. So let's get baking. It says place cookies on some baking paper, but make sure you leave lots of space between them. That's right. Get a tablespoon, get a small sort of a ping pong sized ball of dough, and that will be one cookie, and arrange those on your baking paper and in nice rows. Make sure there's space between them because they will sort of flatten and get bigger as you cook, and you don't want them all attached to each other when you're finished. So kind of make sure they're all nicely arranged on the baking paper. The baking paper is special paper that it will stop it from sticking to the metal sheet, sticking because it burns on. You don't want it to burn. So baking paper, which has some wax on it, will stop it from sticking. So put that on the bottom and then arrange your small balls of cookie dough and make sure you leave space or leave a gap between the two cookies so that they can bake separately. When you make sure to do something, you're just being extra careful. You're just checking twice. You're paying a lot of attention. When you leave your home in the morning, if you're like me, you might, oh, make sure I have my keys, make sure I have my money, because you don't want to get out and then realize you forgot something. So by making sure or paying attention, you hopefully won't make any mistakes.
That's right. So we've got these cookies on their baking tray, or these raw cookies. So the next part, number 6, bake the cookies in the oven for 15 minutes at 180 degrees Celsius. One note, you should always kind of preheat your oven. So turn it on for a few minutes to get the temperature at that level before you start, because if you put it straight in the oven, then turn it on, the oven won't have been fully hot at the right temperature for all that time. So you won't cook the things kind of properly. So yeah, definitely preheat your oven, turn it on for a few minutes to get it right. Then you put it in. Bake is just the right verb for this kind of cooking. And of course, an oven is a cooker of some sort. There are many different types. There's ovens that use electricity, that use gas, little toaster ovens that are kind of just last for a few minutes and turn toast brown, or you could do a few small things in, to really big ovens that you could roast a huge piece of meat and a whole load of vegetables all at the same time. So many different types of ovens working in many different ways. A microwave is a kind of oven. It's basically something that uses some form of heat or other energy to cook food. Here's an example sentence. Can you check the pie? I think it's time to take it out of the oven. So the pie's ready. Let's have a look. Take it out before it burns.
And then it says after those 15 minutes, if you've done everything right, the cookies should be firm, but not hard, right? You don't want to, break a tooth on a cookie. That's a little bit too hard, but it also shouldn't feel still like it's dough, like it's very, very soft. You should be able to pick it up and it won't, fall, or it won't snap your teeth. It should kind of be in between being too soft and too hard. It should be firm, in other words. If something is firm, it's something that, well, it could be too soft, but when you actually touch it, it kind of pushes back against your fingers, something like that. You might see a lake on a cold day and it looks like it's ice on top, but if you actually push it, your finger will go through very quickly. So that is definitely not firm. When we think about things that are firm, we think about things that are quite hard, but not very, very hard. But they will certainly push back against your fingers. You'll feel yourself pushing against something and not just slipping through very, very easily. Let's have a look at the example sentence. Here's something else that we might cook in our kitchens that we should have being a little bit firm. We don't want it to be very soft or liquid. It says the pudding isn't firm enough yet, so you should leave it in the fridge longer. Absolutely. Pudding should not be hard, but it also shouldn't be liquid like soup. It should be kind of firm.
That's exactly it. And the article finishes by saying, enjoy your cookies. So do let them cool down first. Don't shove them right in your mouth when they're straight out the oven. You will burn yourself, but let them cool down and then enjoy your cookies. And I hope you guys do have a try at this. I hope you do enjoy them. That's all we've got time for today, but except for our For You chat question. Let's go to that now.
For You chat.
So our question is, do you do a lot of cooking? If so, what do you like to cook? If not, what would you like to learn to cook?
That's a good question. Well, I think like a lot of people in Taiwan, with the recent lockdowns we've been having, I've been doing a lot more cooking than I did before. You can't go to restaurants, so it's been good to sort of work in the kitchen, make my own food, learn a few new things, try some new recipes like we looked at today. What would I like to learn to cook? Maybe something kind of fancy, some French food or something like that. I have never really taken any classes. And the other thing is that in Taiwan, our kitchens are quite small. And I think sometimes to make fancy food, you need a bigger kitchen. So I think that might be a bit of trouble, but most of the things I make are quite easy. So maybe something a little more challenging. How about you? Do you do a lot of cooking, Pat?
Quite a bit. More recently, I've been cooking things that my 2-year-old son can eat as well. So something that's not too hard, not too many crazy flavors. So he does like different risottos. So I've been like rice dishes. So I've been experimenting with different flavors. I've recently kind of got the Nangua pumpkin risotto, pretty good. So I've just been trying different things with that to use different foods, different flavors to give him more variety, as well as plenty of healthy stuff.
Is there a kind of food that your son really doesn't like?
So far, fingers crossed, no, he eats everything like he's some kind of eating machine. I'm trying, hopefully it stays that way. I would like to learn how to cook Thai food, though. I like Thai food. It's not easy to get all the time, so I'd like to learn how to cook that a bit more. Okay,
Good choice.
Well, that's all the time we've got for today. Thanks for watching, everybody. For English for You, I'm Pat.
And I'm Mike.
We'll talk to you soon. Enjoy your cookies. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Vocabulary Review.
Flour. This bread is made from whole wheat flour instead of the usual white flour. That's why it's a little different. Powder. This white powder is laundry soap. Add 1 cup when you wash 1 basket of clothes. Melt. Put the ice cream back in the freezer before it melts. Whip. Most people would use a machine to whip cream, but Angela does it by hand. Oven. Careful, the pizza is very hot. It just came out of the oven. Firm. Thomas likes to sleep on a firm bed, but I prefer one that's softer.
智慧小補帖
Recipe. Ingredient. Sift.
以上节目是由活用空中美語製作。活用空中美語雜誌，請洽詢全國各大書店。如欲索取試聽教材，請來電02-2364-4000 02-2364-4000，或上網查詢，網址是 www.english4u.net www.english4u.net